Hello, friends. This is Mrs. Dennis, and today I'm going to introduce to you our read aloud for The Wind in the Willows, Chapter 4. I'm going to introduce The Wind in the Willows, Chapter 4, and this chapter is called The Wild Wood. So I'm going to start with vocabulary. Here we go. First, what do I want you to get out of this today? Well, the first thing, students will know details support the main idea, right? So we're going to talk about main idea and details and how that works. And if you can remember, we touched on it a little bit when I drew the table and the legs, and we talked about how the legs support the table and you can't have a table without the legs. It's kind of the same thing. So we're going to touch on that a little bit more. You will understand the text by asking and answering questions based on the details from the text. So you're going to ask and answer questions based on the supporting details from the text. And then you will be able to explain the understanding of the text in a written response. And what that means is I'm going to ask you a question and you're going to write down the answer. And we're going to do that in our discussion. So that's kind of what I want you to get out of this. So let's start with our vocabulary. First word, domestic. Relating to a house or household items. So have you ever heard anyone say like your domestic responsibilities? You see the people with they have the vacuum and they kind of look like they're going to clean the house. Yep, domestic. They're getting ready to do some housework. Evasively. Evasively means not entirely truthful or direct in order to avoid something unpleasant. So you see how I've got Pinocchio. If you've heard of Pinocchio, when he doesn't tell the truth, his nose grows. Yep, that's what evasively means. So that means when you're not entirely truthful or direct about something. Feeble. It means weak or having little energy. So typically people who are older, they're feeble. If you're sick and you don't have a lot of energy, then you can be considered feeble. Heartily. That just means enthusiastically. You're excited about something. You see these friends jumping up and down. They're excited about something. So heartily, it means enthusiastically. Postpone. To put off or schedule for a later time or to delay. There are lots of times when I've had to postpone something. Think about if you let's say you play a sport that's outside, soccer or baseball or softball, and it rains. Then they have to postpone your game. They have to schedule it for a later time, or they delay your game because of the weather. So you can think of it like that. So let's get to these main idea and details. So this should be a review because we did talk about it before, but we're going to talk about it again. So I want you to remember main idea is the most important idea about a topic. It's like the big idea, what the text is mostly about. So I want you just to remember the main idea is what the text is mostly about. That's it, main idea. Now, you see our table? You see at the top of our table, it says main idea. And then the legs of our table say detail 1, detail 2, and detail 3. Those are the supporting details. Supporting details are the small details that support the main idea. It helps to build up your main idea. So do you see how the legs of that table hold it all together? Right? Now you can put things on top of that table. You can put your drink and you can put your food in. It won't fall over. It helps to support the main idea. That's what the legs of the table do. So your supporting details help to support your main idea. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. Now let's get into this read aloud, shall we? I want you to take a look at this picture that you see here on the screen. Now, oops, lost it. Sorry. Got it back. So, I know that in Texas, right, it's hot all the time. And you don't necessarily get all of the seasons But do you know all the seasons? Do you know what they are? I want you to think about it for a second. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds. I want you to think about it. Look at those pictures to help you too. So let's talk about the seasons. We have summer, right? Winter, spring, and fall. So right now we're technically in summer. And then the next season after summer is going to start to get into, like when we get into October, November, that's going to be fall. And then even though we're in Texas and you won't see any snow, when we start to get into December, January, that's going to be winter. And then when we roll back around and we come out of that winter, we're going to get into spring. So those are the 4 seasons. Well, let's talk about what those 4 seasons really mean. So what happens in the summer? It's hot, it's sunny, you can swim, right? Those are the things that you can do in the summer. And also we like the summer because there's no school in the summer, right? So sometimes people will say, oh, my favorite season is the summer because I don't have to go to school in the summer, right? Does that sound like a reason why summer might be your favorite season? Yep. That's just like a lot of people. So what's next? Spring. Spring, it's warm outside. You can play outside. They have flowers, right? So spring is a good time of the year too. Even though you have school in the spring, it's still warm enough where you can go outside and play and you can do different things. Now, keep in mind, some places, they see all 4 seasons and they see them differently. Like where I'm from. Like I said, I'm from Michigan. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And we see all 4 seasons. So in the springtime, the weather is nice and it's warm weather. You can wear a t-shirt and jeans. You don't have to wear shorts because it won't be that hot outside. But you don't have to wear a jacket either because it's not that cool outside. Fall. You rake the leaves. It's cooler weather. You can wear hoodies and jackets. So I want you to think about, look at the picture where you see all the leaves on the ground and you see the hoodie. So in the fall, if you live in a place that has all 4 seasons, then it'll be cooler. You know, and sometimes in fall you have to wear a jacket and you have to wear a hoodie, right? So that you can stay warm while you're outside. And then we have winter. Winter, friends, it is super cold outside. It snows. You wear your big winter coats, your boots, your gloves, your scarves, your hats. You wear all those winter clothes that you see on the screen because guess what? It is cold outside in the winter time. Now, I know that here it doesn't get cold and you guys hardly ever get any snow. But in a lot of places, it does get very cold in the winter time. So those are the 4 seasons. So I want you to think back to our story, right? We've been reading The Wind and the Willows. We read chapter 1, chapter 2. We read chapter 3. Now we're heading into chapter 4. I want you to think about the seasons that you've seen or that you've heard about and seen in the pictures. Which seasons have not occurred in The Wind and the Willows yet? There are 2. Which 2 have not occurred? I want you to think about that for a second. Which seasons have not occurred in The Wind and the Willows? Remember, when the story first started, the very first thing that Mo was doing was what? That's right. He was spring cleaning, right? So it was spring. So the answer to our question, so we know that they've already had spring, but they haven't had fall and winter yet. Oh, fall and winter are the 2 seasons that they haven't had yet. So I want you to think about, what do you think those scenes are going to look like when you see those pictures, when you listen to the story and see those pictures? What do you think they're going to look like? Okay. So I have a couple things I want you to remember, right? We talked about dialogue. We talked about narration. We talked about perspective. Remember, dialogue is when the characters are speaking. Narration is when the narrator is speaking, when someone is telling the story, right? And quotation marks separate narration from dialogue. And you can see the narration is kind of in blue and the dialogue is kind of in red. So for our example, help, They put that in quotation marks. That's dialogue. My cousin Jack said, which is kind of in the blue, that's narration, right? This is something that's going to pop up over and over throughout this story and throughout the year. Like, we're going to talk about dialogue and narration in almost every single story that we read. So it's something that I'm going to keep reminding you about constantly. Every story I'm going to remind you about dialogue and narration. So this won't be the last time you hear about that. A few more things to remember. I want you to remember perspective. Perspective lets the reader know whose experience we are reading about, and it can change from one person to another. So when you're listening to the story, I want you to listen very carefully for a shift in perspective, right? Because somewhere along the line, it's going to go from Mo's perspective to someone else's. And I want you to tell me who that person was and when did that happen, right? Because it's in there. When did that happen, right? And then I want you to listen carefully and think about the theme that is being presented. Theme, right? That's something that we talked about, and if you didn't get that part, it's going to be in the recording from earlier, right? So theme. I want you to think about that, right? The theme. What does the author want us to learn, right? Does he want us to learn about friendship? Does he want us to learn about loyalty? Does he want us to learn about being responsible or irresponsible? You know, if that's the case. What does the author want us to learn? So those are the things that I want you to think about, okay? Remember, the title of chapter 4 is called The Wild Wood. And I want you to listen for a shift in perspective, right? It starts off with Mo's perspective and then it shifts to who. And then I want you to think about the theme. What does the author want us to learn? Those are the things that I want you to think about. All right. Friends, I want you to go ahead and listen to that story. And listen to it twice if you need to. And then you're going to have some questions in the discussion to answer. And then I'm going to follow it up and we're going to talk about it some more tomorrow. All right, friends. Talk to you soon.